4:37 a.m., Ypres salient, Belgium. A heavy mist clings to the low-lying marshland, the ground a cold, yielding softness beneath a thin layer of overnight frost. From a detached perspective, the narrator observes the front line stirring to life. A weak, gray light gradually spreads across the jagged, broken terrain of the Ypres salient. The trenches here are crudely constructed, averaging 8 feet in depth, their floors reinforced with wooden duckboards that groan and creak underfoot. Rats, seemingly indifferent to the war, dart through the gaps, bold and unhurried, acting as if they possess a greater claim to this land than the soldiers themselves. Captain Rowan Hasker of the British 2nd Battalion stands, one gloved hand resting on the parapet, listening intently. The front is eerily quiet now. Only the distant rumble of artillery fired to the east, delivering shells at a measured pace of 4 to 6 per minute. Intelligence reports suggest the Germans are preparing a probing attack at dawn. The British line anticipates movement. Everyone is braced for the inevitable chatter of machine guns. Rowan's men murmur nervously behind him. He mentally tallies 6 Vickers machine guns distributed strategically along their sector. Each gun is operated by a team of 6, a gunner, a loader, a spotter, a coolant handler, an ammunition runner, and a reserve in case of emergency. The Vickers, weighing nearly 62 pounds with its tripod, requires a team of 4 just to move it swiftly. But once in position, stabilized and fed with belts of 303 ammunition, the weapon transforms into something terrifyingly efficient and mathematically lethal, capable of unleashing 450 to 500 rounds per minute, a relentless, thudding rhythm that sighs through advancing infantry with brutal efficiency. The narrator watches as Rowan unfolds a small, well-worn photograph from his inner coat pocket. A woman in a field, her face tilted toward the sun in a smile. He returns it to its place without a word. The war allows for no open displays of sentiment, yet every man carries some small token, a letter from home, a lock of hair, a prayer card. These are the human anchors in a sea of mud and barbed wire. Above the trench, the first faint orange smear of dawn begins to appear. 5:02 a.m. A runner drops down into the trench, breathless with urgency. Enemy movement, confirmed on the Menin road. Command orders immediate preparation. Rowan nods once, his expression grim. Signal teams? Ready, sir. He raises a small whistle to his lips. The sharp, piercing note cuts through the clinging mist. Machine gun crews snap into action with practiced efficiency. There are no shouted orders, only disciplined, purposeful movement. Ammunition boxes are stacked high. The water jacket of the guns are topped off. Condensation hisses from the heated steel as boiling water comes into contact with the cold morning air. The narrator observes how the men's hands tremble, not necessarily from fear, but from the pervasive cold that seems to permanently inhabit these trenches. Rifles are checked and rechecked. Helmets are adjusted. The entire front line seems to coalesce into a single, tense organism across the desolate no-man's land. For 100 yards of churned earth, shattered trees, and rusting barbed wire, the German lines remain shrouded in dim silence. But shapes are beginning to coalesce, dark against the fog. A young private, Ellis Grant, clutches a letter inside his tunic. His daughter is only 2 months old. He has never even seen her. His thumb traces the outline of the envelope through the fabric as he loads fresh magazines into his Webley pistol. He glances at the nearest Vickers team, men crouched low, one with a cigarette trembling between his fingers as he awaits the breaking of the unimaginable calm. 5:20 a.m. The German artillery opens fire first. A sudden, deafening barrage, delivered at a methodical rate of 10 to 12 shells per minute, begins to creep across the British rear trenches. The ground trembles violently, as if it were alive. Clods of mud and chalk rain down. The air is thick with black smoke and the sharp, metallic tang of explosive residue. Rowan waits, anticipating the pattern. The Germans aren't targeting the front trenches yet. They're attempting to sever telephone lines, disrupt communication, and isolate pockets of British defense. Standard preparation before an infantry advance. A second whistle signal carries along the line. Prepare for rifle fire, hold machine guns. The narrator sees the fog begin to shift and dissipate. Shapes emerge, first dozens and hundreds, German infantry. The formations are staggered but purposeful. Officers advance with pistols raised. Bayonets glint menacingly. Ellis Grant breathes deeply through his nose, attempting to steady himself. Rowan lowers his binoculars. Now we begin. 5:27 a.m. Machine guns. Prepare to engage. Rowan shouts above the din. The Vickers crews lean forward, their faces grim. Belts are pulled taut, ensuring a smooth feed. Tripods are secured firmly in place. Gunners settle into their firing positions, fingers resting lightly on the butterfly triggers. The Germans advance across no man's land, the fog glowing pale behind them. Rowan lifts his whistle again, then hesitates. He waits a heartbeat longer, gauging the range, waiting for the optimal moment. 450 yards, the perfect distance for a long, sweeping burst. He blows. The line erupts in a cacophony of gunfire. The 6 Vickers guns fire in near unison, each unleashing a sustained, hammering roar at 500 rounds per minute. The recoil shudders violently through the tripods. Hot casings eject in shimmering arcs of brass. Steam rises from the water jackets in billowing clouds. German infantry collapse in waves, mowed down by the relentless fire. The narrator describes a precise mechanical lethality. Every second, each gun sprays an overlapping field of fire, bullets traveling at 2,440 feet per second, cutting through bodies, gear, and even fragments of shattered trees. The Germans scatter in disarray, some diving desperately into shell holes for cover, others simply collapsing where they stand. Officers shout commands that are lost beneath the overwhelming gunfire. A flare streaks upward, a German signal requesting machine gun cover. Moments later, dark shapes return fire from their lines, the sharp, rattling stutter of MG-08S reaching across the field. Bullets snap and crack overhead. Dirt bursts upward in geysers. Rowan moves along the trench, shouting adjustments and corrections. Shift 5 degrees left. Short bursts only. Coolant, more coolant needed. One of the Vickers teams loses a man, struck cleanly through the helmet. His loader drags him aside, his expression blank with shock. The gun does not stop firing. The belt keeps feeding. Ellis Grant, now firing his rifle in the brief lulls between machine gun bursts, whispers a prayer he barely remembers learning as a child. A bullet whips past his cheek, narrowly missing him. Another strikes the sandbag beside his ear, sending fragments flying. The Germans push forward again, this time in smaller, more dispersed squads. They are smarter, faster, and more adaptive. They aim for the gaps and low ground. 6:01 a.m. The fog lifts just enough for Rowan to see their right flank beginning to buckle under the pressure. "Reinforce Sector B," he orders, his voice hoarse. A reserve team sprints down the narrow communication trench, one man carrying extra belts of ammunition slung around his neck like heavy cloth. They nearly lose their footing on the wet duckboards, but press forward relentlessly. The narrator highlights the swirling chaos, the human element amidst the mechanical precision. A German squad manages to reach a patch of shattered brush only 120 yards from the British line. They are close enough to hurl grenades. Rowan sees them too late. Down! The explosion throws dirt and debris high into the air. Shrapnel rings against helmets. One machine gun tripod collapses, its gun falling sideways, rendered useless. The loader screams in agony, clutching his leg where a fragment of shrapnel is lodged. Rowan leaps forward, helping to reset the weapon, shouting for the reserve crew to provide immediate support. Sweat mixes with mud on his face, forming a mask. The Germans attempt a final, desperate push. 6:14 a.m. A British supporting battery on the ridge behind opens fire with devastating effect. 18-pounder guns, each capable of unleashing 20 shells per minute. Their timed barrage lands perfectly between the advancing Germans and the British line, creating a curtain of explosions that forces the Germans to withdraw in disarray. The machine guns slow their relentless pace, then cease firing altogether, their barrels glowing red-hot, steam rising in thick plumes. Silence gradually returns, broken only by the moans of the wounded, the cries of the dying, and the whistle of shell fragments settling into the mud. Rowan lowers himself onto a crate, his chest heaving with exertion. He pulls out the photograph again, holding it a moment longer this time, as if drawing strength from it. The narrator concludes the scene with the first layer of tension resolved, but with the knowledge that the war is far from over, because this is only the beginning. The machine gun has demonstrated its power, but its full strategic consequence has yet to be realized. 7:45 a.m., Sarah Front, Psalm. Overcast skies, a faint drizzle begins to fall, making the already muddy ground slick and treacherous underfoot. The narrator observes as the soldiers from Part 1 stagger forward, now fully exposed to the open ground. The no-man's land stretches for 600 meters, a desolate expanse littered with barbed wire, shell craters, and the scattered bodies of the first wave. Rain darkens the already saturated soil, making each step heavier and more difficult. Visibility is limited. Only about 200 meters ahead, the mist intermingling with the lingering smoke from recent bombardments. Captain Rowan Hasker crouches behind a small rise, surveying the scene. His binoculars capture movement in the German lines. Machine gun crews readjusting their positions, rifles being lifted, grenades being readied. Each Maxim machine gun has an effective range of 2,000 meters, but the optimal kill zone is within 400 to 500 meters, where overlapping fields of fire can decimate advancing infantry with horrifying efficiency. The gun's water-cooled barrels hiss in the damp air as the crews anticipate the coming onslaught. Ellis, cover left flank. Rowan shouts, his voice barely audible above the wind. Rain runs down his face, mingling with the mud. Ellis Grant nods grimly, rifle at the ready. The Vickers teams in support positions brace themselves, preparing for the inevitable. Ammo belts rattle as they are checked. Steam rises from the water jackets of the guns, condensation dripping onto the sandbags. The first German machine gun opens fire again, a precise, tearing sound that shatters the relative quiet. 600 rounds per minute, trace of bullets cutting bright arcs through the air. Soldiers fall instantly. Some collapse into mud, others into shell holes, their faces frozen in expressions of shock and disbelief. The narrator describes the mechanical efficiency. The gun fires continuously, creating overlapping zones of fire with other nearby Maxim guns. Human beings, no matter their courage or training, are caught in a web of geometry and physics, their fate determined by trajectories and calculations. Rowan moves along the trench, shouting orders, adjusting angles of fire. He gestures urgently to a loader, who nearly slips on the slick duckboards. Keep belts tight. Don't stop. Hot barrels are nothing. We need this line held at all costs. Meanwhile, German artillery fires a creeping barrage in the distance. 105 millimeters howitzers, firing up to 12 rounds per minute. The explosions synchronize with the advancing infantry. Shell fragments plummet from the sky. Water-sodden mud sprays upwards. Men duck instinctively, seeking meager cover. A lieutenant raises a pistol, attempting to signal for reinforcements, but the signal is drowned out by the relentless gunfire. Ellis finds himself close to a fallen comrade, the dead man still clutching a letter in his hand. The private had promised to return home to his family. Ellis drops to a shallow crater, using it as cover, and whispers a prayer for the man's family. A burst from a German machine gun cuts through the mud beside him. He feels a shockwave in his chest, instinctively gripping his rifle tighter. 8:10 a.m. Chaos increases exponentially. German squads, having somehow survived the initial barrage, advance in small, coordinated groups. Each squad aims for the weak points in the British lines, the spaces between machine guns, exploiting any misalignment or vulnerability. The narrator emphasizes human ingenuity and adaptability. Soldiers adapt on the fly, using shell holes as microfortifications, crawling, rolling, and darting across the exposed ground in a desperate attempt to survive. Rowan signals urgently with a hand flare, directing attention to the new threats. Vickers crews adjust their aim, focusing on the newly identified targets. Water jackets hiss ominously, belts clatter loudly, and the guns hammer out a sustained, deafening rhythm. Each gun weighs 62 pounds, mounted on a heavy tripod, yet the men manage them with precise coordination, born of desperation and training. Ammunition runners dash across the muddy ground, risking their lives to carry 250-round belts to the guns. Recoil rocks the tripods, but they remain firmly planted. The rain intensifies, turning the battlefield into a quagmire. Trench floors become dangerously slippery, soldiers sliding and struggling to maintain their footing, some even dropping their rifles in the chaos. A young corporal, soaked to the bone, manages to crawl forward and reset a misaligned machine gun, bringing it back into the fight. His hands are numb with cold and exhaustion, but he fires 3 short bursts to cover advancing comrades. Across no man's land, the German soldiers attempt to throw grenades into the trenches, hoping to eliminate the machine gun nests. British riflemen respond in kind, dropping attackers with aim fire, preventing them from getting close. Shouts mix with gunfire, explosions, and the whistle of bullets, creating a deafening cacophony. The narrator notes the inherent randomness of it all. Survival is a combination of courage, training, and sheer dumb luck. 8:35 a.m. The battle reaches a fever pitch of intensity. Casualty rates escalate rapidly. 1/3 of the attacking British force is down, some dead, some wounded beyond hope. The remaining men cling desperately to shell holes or low rises, seeking what little protection they can find. The strategic advance stalls completely under the relentless machine gun fire. Rowan spotted a German officer directing a counterattack. The officer waves a sword, signaling a small detachment to attempt a flanking maneuver. Rowan orders a new angle of fire, attempting to counter the move. Vickers' crews swivel their tripods, adjusting their aim accordingly, water steaming from the barrels as belts feed automatically. Each round travels at 2,440 feet per second, capable of penetrating sandbags and light cover with ease. The German flanks are decimated before they even reach the trenches, their attack failing before it begins. Meanwhile, Private Ellis witnesses a miracle of human resilience. Soldiers carry the wounded, dragging them through the mud, sometimes tripping and falling, sometimes dropping precious packs of ammunition. One medic with a stretcher slips in the mud, but quickly recovers, continuing his relentless advance toward the line of fire. Letters, photographs, and personal tokens scatter across the battlefield as men fall or advance, small reminders of the lives they are fighting to protect. The human cost of this battle is staggering, a horrifying waste of life. 9 a.m. German artillery ramps up its bombardment in response to the failing attack. The barrage intensifies, shells landing increasingly close to the British lines, threatening supply and reserve positions. 18-pounder guns continue to fire at a rate of 20 shells per minute, the deafening concussion shaking the trenches to their foundations. The narrator observes the brutal coordination. Artillery softens the line before the infantry advances, but machine guns dominate the kill zones, preventing any real progress. Rowan signals frantically for reserve units to plug the gaps in the line. Soldiers scramble desperately from the communication trenches, answering the call. One soldier carries extra belts of ammunition around his neck like a scarf, slipping several times in the mud, coating his uniform. Yet they reach the Vickers guns, ready to continue the barrage and hold the line. Even wounded men grab belts and reload guns, embodying the mechanical human symbiosis that defines this horrific front. The fog lifts further, revealing no man's land more clearly, exposing the carnage. Soldiers on both sides fire across the broken terrain, their bodies moving like chess pieces under the constant threat of death. Shouts, orders, and the mechanical rhythm of machine guns converge in a chaotic symphony of destruction. Ellis, now soaked and exhausted, crawls towards the next shell hole, seeking cover. He sees a corporal carefully adjusting a tripod-mounted Vickers while under sniper fire. Steam rises from the water-cooled barrel. Brass cartridges eject and spit into the mud. Each bullet is precise, lethal, and efficient. By 9:25 a.m., a temporary lull appears in the fighting. Smoke and mist swirl across the battlefield, obscuring the terrain, hiding the dead and dying. Rowan and his men regroup in shell holes, checking the wounded, reloading their weapons, and readjusting their angles of fire, preparing for the next wave. The first wave of attack is largely decimated. Only discipline and the relentless power of machine guns have prevented a total collapse of the line. The narrator concludes this section by highlighting the staggering human cost, the mechanical domination of firepower, and the chaotic adaptability of both sides in the conflict. Soldiers are exhausted, mud-soaked, and traumatized by what they have witnessed. The battlefield is a gruesome blend of geometry, physics, and human resilience, a crucible where modern warfare is being forged. The chaos of battle has reached its apex. The next phase will determine whether the line holds, or whether it collapses completely under the onslaught. Machine guns have proven their dominance on the battlefield, but human ingenuity continues to push, survive, and adapt amidst the unimaginable horror. 9:40 a.m., Sarah Front, Psalm. Intermittent drizzle persists. The ground churned into a quagmire, visibility gradually improving as the fog continues to lift. The battlefield lies in ruins, a wasteland of destruction. Shell craters, thick mud, and tangled barbed wire dominate the landscape. Survivors of the second wave regroup in fragmented trenches and shell holes, adjusting to the unrelenting rhythm of machine gun fire. Rowan scans no man's land, carefully noting shifts in German positions. Some Maxim teams are running low on water for barrel cooling. Smoke and steam betray their locations. He signals to his forward observer, knowing that the time for decisive action is now. The British need to break the stalemate or risk annihilation. The proposed strategy is a carefully planned flanking maneuver, using shell holes for cover and moving in coordinated waves. Ellis, covered in mud and utterly exhausted, joins the small detachment chosen for the perilous flanking advance. Each step is deliberate and carefully calculated. Trip distance per step, 60 to 70 centimeters, keeping as low as possible to avoid the 500 to 600 rounds per minute tearing through the air. The narrator emphasizes human focus and the all-encompassing fear that grips each man. Each is hyper-aware of his own pounding heartbeat and the deadly path that lies ahead. 9:50 a.m. Vickers' crews provide covering fire. They're shooting steady, suppressive, and precise. Belts feed automatically. Each cartridge moving with an almost mechanical rhythm, barrels steaming from the heat. The water jackets hiss ominously. The recoil rocks the tripods, but they remain surprisingly controlled. The flanking team crawls forward, inch by agonizing inch, dodging deadly tracer fire and shell splinters. Suddenly, a German grenade lands near a small group of men. One soldier dives on it instinctively, sacrificing himself to absorb the blast and save his comrades. Mud and blood mingle together in a gruesome display. Others recoil in horror. Ellis's heart pounds in his chest. Survival is measured in seconds. The sound of the Maxim continues, metallic, merciless, and consistent, yet small pockets of advancement begin to form the gaps between the lines, offering a glimmer of hope. The narrator notes the remarkable coordination and improvisation of the soldiers. They communicate with hand signals, whistles, and shouted commands, working together to achieve their objective. Ammo belts are passed silently from hand to hand. The wounded are dragged backward under covering fire. Letters, photographs, and personal mementos flutter in the mud, scattered testaments to the lives being fought for. Ellis glimpses a faded image of a child in a comrade's breast pocket, a small anchor to a life outside this inferno. 10:15 a.m. The flanking maneuver finally reaches the first line of German trenches. Grenades are thrown with practiced precision. Rifle fire covers the advance, suppressing enemy. Maxim crews, momentarily disrupted by the attack, attempt to realign their guns and return fire. The British exploit this hesitation, pushing forward with renewed vigor. Casualties remain high, but coordination and momentum now define the action, rather than sheer attrition and firepower alone. Rowan observes a critical moment. The German left flank is beginning to weaken, showing signs of collapse. He signals forward another wave of troops, committing more men to the assault. Lee Enfield rifles fire in controlled bursts. Bayonets are fixed, glinting in the dim light. Soldiers surge into the partially abandoned trench, engaging the enemy. Mud, blood, and the acrid stench of cordite fill the air, creating a suffocating atmosphere. Hand-to-hand combat erupts in a brutal and desperate struggle for survival. Men fall on both sides, their screams and shouted orders intertwining in a horrifying chorus. Amid the chaos, one soldier clutches a photo of his fiancée tightly to his chest, a poignant reminder of what he is fighting for. Another scribbles a quick note, tucks it into a waterproof pouch, and hands it to a comrade, asking him to deliver it home if he doesn't make it. These small, human moments punctuate the mechanical brutality of the battlefield, reminding all of the human cost of war. By 10:40 a.m., the British have secured a portion of the German line, achieving a significant victory. The Maxim machine guns, though still formidable weapons, are partially neutralized by captured positions and flanking fire. Steam hisses from the water jackets as exhausted crews attempt to continue their resistance, their efforts gradually becoming futile. The narrator emphasizes the interplay of technology and human ingenuity. Without discipline and training, the mechanical advantage of the machine gun could not be fully exploited. Conversely, human daring and adaptability can mitigate even the most lethal firepower. Ellis moves cautiously to the captured trench, surveying the utter destruction. Bodies, weapons, and scattered personal effects. A scene of chaos frozen in time. He pauses near a mound of spent cartridges, reflecting on the precision and sheer power that transformed what was once an infantry skirmish into a calculated inferno of death. Rates of fire, barrel overheating, and the discipline of the soldiers, all determined who survived and who perished in this brutal conflict. By 11 a.m., a temporary calm returns to the battlefield. Smoke and mist swirl across the terrain, concealing the horrors beneath, obscuring the dead and dying. Rowan consolidates the British position, orders ammunition resupplies, and prepares for a possible German counterattack. He writes a brief note to headquarters, summarizing the events. Part of the line secured. Heavy casualties sustained, but machine guns partially suppressed. Further advancement is possible. The narrator concludes his final section by underlining the strategic consequences of what has transpired. Machine guns have defined defensive advantages, required new tactics and strategies, and ultimately reshaped military doctrine. Survivors, utterly exhausted and traumatized, now participate in a living laboratory of modern warfare, their experiences shaping the future of conflict. Maps will be redrawn, military strategies revised, and invaluable lessons will be learned about technology, morale, and coordination. The battlefield, once a simple front line, has become a theater where firepower, human resolve, and ingenuity converge in a deadly dance. This third layer of climax ends with a partial breakthrough, juxtaposing human heroism against the brutal dominance of machine guns. The psychological impact is indelible. Soldiers recognize the staggering lethality of sustained firepower, the randomness of survival, and the critical importance of coordination and teamwork. These hard-won lessons will reverberate through subsequent campaigns of the Great War, forever changing the face of warfare.